Hello there, and a very warm welcome to this exciting session where we're going to be thinking about how we reignite the retail sector moving into 2021. My name is Philip Carter. I'm the Chief Analyst for IDC in Europe, and I'm really looking forward to hopefully providing you some insights in terms of how retail organizations can move from crisis response to reignition, and the need to create a completely new technology roadmap for their future retail enterprise. Now, in order to do that, I think it's really important to understand what's happened in 2020, which is a real shock to the retail system. And the implications in terms of the supply chain, in terms of the workforce, in terms of changing customer demands, is still being felt across all retail subsectors. And what is clear is that the retail sector has actually shone through amazingly well in terms of being able to provide us all, the entire society, with the key products and capabilities that have needed to keep everyone moving forward. And a huge amount of respect and admiration for the frontline staff that have been putting themselves out there every day, putting themselves at risk, the supply chains that have been kept remarkably resilient, dealing with multiple channels and customer demands on an ongoing basis. But in order to really understand the impact on the retail subsector, the retail sector in generally, we need to dig into the details of the subsectors within the broader vertical. So if you look at this chart, what we're trying to do is redraw the subsectors in retail as a result of the shock by looking at this in a bit more granular level of detail. First of all, understand that this is a 5-stage framework where we're looking to help retail organizations move from that crisis to the future enterprise, which is completely technology oriented, and which will underpin the recovery moving forward. But what we've got here is all of the underlying subsectors on the journey towards that future enterprise. And what we've tried to do is to give a sense of what type of trajectory those subsectors are on towards recovery, based on the extent to which that subsector is going through a reset or not. And the difference between something like online-only retail versus eating and drinking establishments or apparel and accessory stores couldn't be more noticeable. And this is part of what we're trying to understand, is how these different subsectors are responding to the events of 2020. Now, the size of the bubble there reflects ICT spend in each of those subsectors, and that's important because we do think that moving forward, organizations are going to have to rethink their technology architectures, recreate their digital roadmaps, and really put technology at the heart of the business model moving forward. And that's going to be the basis for moving from response to reignition and igniting a new fire for the retail sector that doesn't take us to the next normal, but actually a better normal. And I think we really need to take into account some of the changes that we've experienced in 2020 in order to be able to do that. And so what I'd like to do is take you through a few what we call retail game changers. And these are going to be in the form of hashtags, just to try and get you to understand what's really impacted the retail sector in 2020. First of all, no surprise, brick and mortar pressure. Now, if you look at the number of store closures, the number of consolidations and divestitures in the retail space, it has been unprecedented in 2020. You look at the risk of dealing with frontline staff, the safety of those frontline staff in those stores. That's also contributed to some of the challenges that store-focused retailers have had to deal with. We also see the rise of dark stores, which are primarily focused on that online subsector or delivering online goods, as an adjacent element of this brick and mortar pressure across the retail sector. Second hashtag is changing spending patterns. So increasingly, you're going to see new market segments moving to online. You're going to see an increasing focus on cashless, so not just credit cards, but also digital payments, an acceleration of digital payments. You see a lot more consumers going green and sustainable, wanting transparency in terms of how products are delivered to them across the entire value chain, the entire supply chain, but also the working practices that delivered that product to your doorstep. And if you look at some of the challenges that the likes of Boohoo in the UK have faced in the last few months, you will see the importance of doing that. But you also see this spike in demand for key products or different products. So webcams for all of us as we connect digitally have shot through the roof. And if you look at the share price of Logitech, one of the key providers of those webcams, that really reflects the demand for those products. So, but that highlights the fluctuating nature and volatile nature of demand for different products based on the changing spending patterns. Then you see new partnerships emerging, new ecosystem orientations. So who would have thought that Morrisons and Amazon would have come together as part of a key partnership to deliver same-day delivery service for Morrisons partners who are also Amazon Prime customers? Competitors coming together because they need to compromise to deliver something that customers are demanding. And this is happening across all different areas. So it's not just in terms of online, but it's in apparel, in fashion. If you look at H&M, they've opened up their supply chain to invite new players to deliver some of the capabilities as part of that supply chain to get to scale. The next game changer is all about how tech is driving value. This chart really highlights how Ocado, with a focus on tech, has seen its valuation increase dramatically in 2020 as a result of the investments that it's made in its tech platforms, being able to sell those tech platforms to other retailers versus Marks and Spencer, which is a pretty traditional retailer. And they've actually come together to create a partnership along the same lines as Morrisons and Amazon that I highlighted earlier for food delivery in a shorter time frame. And you see this emergence of new types of commerce models off the back of that. So we see this focus on quick commerce, so delivering capabilities in 15 or 30-minute windows on two wheels, smaller selection of goods. And that's the balance between speed and risk that is starting to emerge as part of the shift towards the tech and value creation in the retail sector. So those are some of the retail game changers. And our view is that those game changers on the left-hand side of this chart that you can see are part of what needs to be taken into account for any retailer as they create a new operating model for the future to deliver what we call real-time personalization. Now, that's the holy grail, is real-time personalization at scale for retailers. But in order to do that, based on what we've experienced in 2020 with those game changers, you do need a different operating model, a completely different operating model. And that is what is going to be the basis for that real-time personalization at scale. Now, our view is that the new operating model is going to involve four key things. It's going to involve a new digital roadmap. So that's what I alluded to earlier in terms of the CEOs and the C-suite of retailers having to create a new use case journey towards that future enterprise. The digital dream team, which is the C-suite, it's also known as the C-suite, but this is being able to put digital first as part of the operating model and executing on that accordingly. You do need a different technology architecture to support that, which is more integrated, open and extensible in nature, but it also requires a very aggressive core modernization strategy. Now, what I'm going to do is take you through each of those four key elements of that new operating model for retail in a bit more detail, because we do think that that is what is going to be critical to deliver that real-time personalization at scale. Now, so let's focus on the digital roadmap first and foremost. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to have to recreate the digital roadmap based on those retail game changes that I highlighted earlier. But clearly, the focus for real-time personalization is on customer experience and focusing on delivering game-changing customer experiences as a differentiator. And generally, a lot of retails spend a lot of time on omni-channel, on omni-experience to deliver that real-time personalization. And that's important, and that needs to continue to sustain retailers moving forward. But we also think there's a critical requirement to include the back office as part of those efforts, as part of that roadmap. Because that's how you get to scale. You can't launch a new mobile app without connecting it back to your supply chain and your financials and your HR systems. So what I'm going to be doing here with this roadmap is to try and give you some ideas as to how you bring together those different elements of the back office to the front office to drive that scale. So if you think about Horizon 3, which is the longer term, what we're going to do is look at Horizon 3 and then reverse engineer back to Horizon 2 and 1, so the medium and shorter terms, to understand the role of finance and HR in each of those horizons to deliver that scale. So let's focus on Horizon 3 first. So we start at the end and then we reverse engineer. So real-time personalization, what is required from a financial system in order to do that? Well, our view is that this is an ecosystem financial platform, which is basically gives you the ability to simulate an overview of the impact of key financial decisions on the ecosystem. So, for example, put yourself in the shoes of that CFO of Morrison's in the context of their partnership with Amazon. If they make a change in terms of some of their investments, what are the impacts of that chain on not just on Morrison's, but also on Amazon? So that's that ecosystem-centric business model which needs to be taken into account by that ecosystem financial platform. On the HR front, you need a skills platform, a cross-organizational skills platform that provides that broader retail ecosystem with shared pools of talent that they can tap into based on real-time customer needs. And so that's going not just internal to the organization, but increasingly external as well. So that's Horizon 3. Horizon 2 is all about fluidity and agility in the front office, but how that drives the back office fluidity as well. So agile workforce, in terms of HR, which is all about creating fluid organizational structures, flexible, outcome-based teams, and that's based on an intelligent HR platform with detailed skills profiles to deliver adaptive squad planning, as an example, based on the real-time needs of the business. This is not external, but just in the business, but it has to be agile. Similarly, for finance, you need to be able to provide a holistic evaluation of investments. So you could be making some acquisitions, there could be mergers, could be divestitures, could be consolidation, and you need to see that holistic view from a planning, from a reporting, from a consolidation standpoint in the organization, but not just for finance, but across the broader teams as well. Finally, Horizon 1, in the here and the now. Clearly, in Horizon 1, retailers are going to be focusing on CX, customer experience, in the front office, but in the back office, it's all about resource optimization. For finance, that means supplier network optimization, which is really thinking about a flexible financial reporting, consolidation, and planning engine to optimize supplier networks, balancing cost, risk, and demand satisfaction rates by supplier. For HR, it's all about talent optimization, and increasingly that's about employee experiences, delivering game-changing employee experiences to deal with, the seasonality in retail. So you're dealing with hourly employees, shift employees, full-time employees, and you've got to be able to provide experience scorecards effectively to them to drive employee advocacy, because there will be a war for talent on an ongoing basis in retail, regardless of whether it's those different types of job profiles, but moving forward depending on the fluctuating demand. So that's the digital roadmap that connects the back office to the front office. It is constituted of a use case journey. It's based on this use case journey, which what we've seen is when you get granular like this in terms of these use cases, and more specific in terms of the business initiatives that a retailer needs to put in place to achieve that future enterprise state, which is a platform for real-time personalization. What we've experienced in 2020 requires retailers generally to reprioritize some of the use cases. So, for example, in Horizon 1, you're probably going to see a focus on digital workforce management, as an example, or from an HR standpoint, or revenue and margin assurance for the supply network optimization. Clearly, that's a big focus. And on the front office, there's going to be an increased focus on omni-channel order orchestration and fulfillment. So that's the reprioritization that we're seeing. But there's also movement of use cases. So you might see next-gen payments moving from Horizon 2 to Horizon 1 because of what we talked about in terms of that shift, that increased shift towards cashless and the need to have different payment options from a retailer standpoint. So CEOs, the broader C-suite, are going to have to think about reprioritizing, aligning this roadmap to execute on it based on a new normal, that better normal that we highlighted earlier. So this comes to the next element of our operating model, which is the digital dream team, the C-suite. And generally, the executor of that digital roadmap tend to be the heads of customer experience, CMOs, the front office people with the heads of operations. What we're saying here is that you need to bring HR to help with that people management piece in terms of safety, productivity in that hybrid world moving forward. You need finance, you need the finance teams to understand the implications on cash management, on liquidity, on future business decisions around financials in order to drive that scale. And then also critically, you need IT, you need the technology leadership to be part of the discussion from start to finish, because they're going to be dealing with variability, unprecedented levels of fluctuating demands, unpredictability, and they've got to provide a technology platform in order to do that. And it's not just the CIO, it's the CTO, heads of innovation, chief digital officers, all of those technology leaders need to come together to deliver this integrated technology architecture that is open, intelligent, and extensible. Now, this is a conceptual model which highlights the need for organizations to modernize their traditional enterprise IT stack, from infrastructure, hardware, database, middleware, applications, all the way through that towards this intelligent core, which is increasingly cloud-based, but is data-driven as well. So you get the data pipelines coming not just from internal processes and actions, but increasingly external triggers and ecosystem behavior that needs to be brought into that intelligent core. It needs to be open to allow the seamless flow of that data. It needs to be intelligent to drive the next best action for employees as part of that game-changing employee experience that I highlighted earlier. But it needs to be extensible because it's going to be flexibility, the name of the game here, speed to market, speed to outcomes, and you need an extensible architecture in order to support that. Now, in principle, that makes a lot of sense, and we think that we know that the technology teams need to go all for one and one for all and come together to deliver this type of integrated architecture. But it requires a critical capability, which is in the core, and that requires an aggressive core modernization strategy. We have seen for retailers across the board that their mission-critical environments in IT and broadly across the core have been set up for a business model that is decades old. And it's not really built for the flexibility and scale that is required to deliver that real-time personalization that I highlighted earlier, that is part of what we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis now. So there needs to be this aggressive core modernization strategy where you unpick the monolithic applications of the past and federate them in terms of modular SaaS applications or even apps. So that's increasingly going to be cloud-based, but also extensible because you need to fill the gaps with new capabilities. Could be around contactless, it could be around curbside pickup, it could be around internally capabilities around cash forecasting. That needs to fill those gaps as part of that core modernization strategy. So we've covered a lot of ground here. 4 key elements for that new operating model for retail. We've talked about the new digital roadmap and the need to build that out across those 3 horizons. The digital dream team that brings in HR, finance, and IT. That new type of technology architecture where you don't have a sidecar model internally facing IT versus digital IT. They're part together as part of that one platform. And then as part of that, you have this aggressive core modernization strategy, which unpicks the monolithic applications of the past and makes them much more modular and flexible to deal with the dynamic nature of the markets that are going to be the norm moving forward. So we do think that is required. It's absolutely required because the next normal will be digital first. It'll be increasingly contactless. It'll be virtual, regardless of the subsector. You're going to have to provide technology-driven capabilities that cater for the changing customer demands, which are going to constantly fluctuate. What we've experienced in 2020 in terms of the volatility and complexity will increase in 2021. So we do think that that's part of what needs to be taken into account as we move from response to reignition. There is a major opportunity now for a reset, to rethink business models in retail. It needs to be tech-centric, it needs to be platform-oriented, it needs to be based on an ecosystem to deliver that real-time personalization at scale, and technology underpins that business model to bring innovation to the core. So with that, I want to provide 4 key recommendations for you just to think about as you move towards creating your 2021 technology roadmap for the future retail enterprise. We see and we appreciate how important the frontline workers have been in retail over the past 9-10 months. But motivation is king. We need resilience now into that people side of the business. The workforce is going to have to deal with a lot more change, and we need to engage them, empower them with those new employee experiences that are highlighted so that they feel motivated to deliver that customer experience. Part of that is upskilling them, providing them with real-time career development recommendations as part of their employee journeys, regardless of the job profile. But then we do need to reshape the skills landscape, because that digital-first retail operating model, that digital-first next normal that I highlighted, will require digital skills. And we need to bridge that skills gap, and we need to bridge it quickly in order to deliver that sustainable competitive advantage. Thirdly, it's about a new financial engine, because the flexibility required for finance, but also for HR, based on market consolidation, some of the new partnerships, new customer triggers, it's going to require a much more dynamic financial capabilities to drive real-time decision-making, to think about the implications of key decisions on the ecosystem, on partners, on customers, on the internal teams. That's going to be critical moving forward. And finally, an analogy to wrap up here. 4-wheel drive retail. You have to think about taking that front office level of innovation in terms of speed and scale to the core. Both need to move at the same pace. You can't have one moving at slow speed, another one moving at fast speed. They both need to move it at a fast pace, and that involves bringing that level of innovation, that speed and that scale into the core, and driving a new mindset in terms of the teams, but also a new approach in terms of the technology architecture. So with that, I hope that that's given you some ideas, some insights in terms of how to reframe retail, to move from response to reignition. And I really look forward to your feedback, your questions moving forward. Thank you very much.